Or we're live.
We're here.
Hello, friends. We are so thrilled that you are here with us, theater educators across the country and even in Montana and Hawaii, two states that we've been wanting to get to be part of the American Theater Wing. Welcome. We are here tonight to give information about outfitting your theater space and how to apply to the Andrew Lloyd Webber Classroom Resources Grant. And we have an amazing group of people who are not only extraordinary artists, but what I really love about these folks is what great citizens of the field they are and how committed they are to the next generation. And you can see that, and you'll see that even more tonight. So please welcome Natasha Katz, lighting designer with just only 19 Tony nominations and 8 Tony Awards. Germán Martínez is an award-winning freelance theatrical sound designer based in New York City. David Zinn, a costume and set designer and a 3-time Tony Award winner. Alex Donnelly, Vice President and General Manager at Broadway PRG, the world's leading provider of services and solutions in entertainment and live events. Thank you. We need you. Wow. And last but certainly not least, Jen Schriever, lighting designer, Tony nominee, Obie Award winner. And we're thrilled that you're all with us tonight. Now, my colleague here, Melissa Cabrero, she is our director of programs. So I am going to pass it over to Melissa, who's going to pose a couple of questions to our panelists. They will answer those questions. They are based on some of the questions that you all sent in. And then we will leave time for you all to ask questions, and we'll try and answer them. If we don't answer all of your questions, I'm going to say this again, but just so you get it, please email us at programs@americantheater, R-E, not E-R, wing.org, and we will answer your questions. So with no further ado, Melissa Cabrero, take it away.
Yes. Thank you, Heather. Thank you. Thank you. So, I'm really excited for this panel, and through getting a lot of registrations for today's event, we actually have some folks who have submitted questions in advance. And I think the following question was something that was asked in just a lot of different ways. So what I wanted to ask all of you is, what you think are top 2 to 3 principles to consider when laying a strong foundation for a theater program or outfitting a theater space. And I would love to pass this on to Germán, if you want to kick us off.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm going to answer in my experience so far with being on the panel and the kind of folks who have applied and how I've been moved by, and really how we have been moved by their application. And I think the kind of the principles that guide us are application and expansion, as far as thinking about where we are, what is the intention of course, the money that's going to be used, and what is the future long-term goal of how you see that money being used, or how that's going to be put into the community. I think a lot about there was a specific school, a middle school in a Black community, who was looking for a sound system, and they wanted to retrofit the auditorium to make sure that it was a multi-purpose space. And so they looked at application for chess tournaments, for prom, for any other competitions, and of course, as well as theater and live performance. But they really were thinking long-term goals of how is this package going to be useful for us. So as far as application and expansion, there are folks who are really looking long-term goal.
Great. Yeah. So that multi-purpose use was a big thing for you, Germán.
Absolutely. It's that thinking of how are we going to really make the most out of this time. Oftentimes, people want to think of like a one-time use for something, which is also entirely valid. But as far as how is this going to really spread throughout the community that is our ecosystem of the school that we're at.
Great. Yeah. And, I'm curious too, perhaps what are some questions teachers can or applicants can ask themselves for figuring out what their needs are, like if they're really just starting a program from the ground up, and would love to hear your thoughts on that as well. Yeah, any thoughts, Alex?
So let me start by saying I'm not an educator. So sometimes, the approach that, my experience is colored by not being in a classroom every day with students. But sometimes when we were evaluating different applications, I found myself thinking back to, from the basics of theater, like, can people be seen? Can people be heard? And then I think, like, what makes it interesting for us in a design and production community is, like, can people express creative ideas and creative intent? And, would this grant further that? So, maybe as a silly example, but if we are in a very small black box space, or maybe a repurposed storage closet or classroom, maybe sound needs are more limited there, but we need to make sure we have some basic theatrical lighting. And then things like acting cubes and door frames and, sort of the building blocks of, okay, now you can put a scene in a table setting in an apartment. We're using imagination. If you are looking at, re-outfitting a large auditorium, maybe sound is going to be a lot more important there. And thinking about, kind of where your program is in its development, and kind of scaling with it. And I appreciate that that may mean something different to me than, an educator in the room every day. But I think sometimes we've seen applications that maybe swing for the fences, but in reading the application, it feels like, maybe we're actually 2 steps back from a specific ask. On the flip side, one of the ones I remember really liking last year was a very focused ask for scrim, or like a curtain for a back wall. But, hey, this is visually distracting. It's, not the acoustics are bad. For $2,000, we can put this up and it'll be there for a long time and get a lot of use. If I remember correctly, I think that was a pretty quick yes from us, because it's hyper specific. As Germán's saying, like, you see the long-term value of that, you see the long-term planning. And okay, if we address that this year, maybe next year we want to think about, like, what kind of lights are we going to put on that, back curtain. But, like, that's the more immediate need, and that's where that program was in its development.
Awesome. Go ahead, Zinn. I know you wanted to say something.
Yeah, and I'll be very quick because I see you too, Jen. But I want to lift that up. First of all, I also want to say welcome, but also like I want to really, as someone who was on the panel last year, like, the applications are very profoundly discussed by people who really, really, really want to help you. And it was very moving to me in a way that I didn't expect. And so we're here, we get you, we were you, we are you, and we want to give you the resources you have. So I would just quickly sort of say overall, like, sustainability, like, not just like we're doing Shrek Jr. and we want to make things, but, like, what can you do that's going to be useful to us? I mean, do Shrek Jr. because it's great, but what can we do that's going to be useful to us? How can we build our infrastructure as opposed to how we can build our show? And I'll get to this later, but I think, Alex, you said a mouthful, which I also found very moving, which is, can people be seen and can people be heard? And those are beautiful things to think about in a very practical way. And they're also holistically a very beautiful thing to think about in terms of making a theater program and making a space for performance and creativity in your school. And I just want to lift that up.
I know you wanted to speak, Jen.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like Zinn just said, like, there are so many amazing applications and there's just a limited amount of resource. So, like, the broader you can explain your need in the storytelling of why you're making the ask you're making, just helps us make a really hard decision. Like, obviously it's impossible sometimes to pick somebody over the other. It doesn't mean somebody deserves it more than the other. We just have to make a choice. So if you're making a specific gear ask or something, if you can explain why, and there's a variety of, we're not always giving just to somebody for reasons of like a specific reason. Sometimes it's about, the students really want to learn this thing or whatever, and we've thought about it, and this is why we're asking for this type of equipment, or we can't see them at all. So obviously very important. I'm a lighting designer. So I would just advocate for like explaining the story of what your ask is about. So it can help us have a fuller picture of the ask.
You all talked about sometimes well, two things. One, I think one of the things I hear you all talk about a lot is not only making sure that the productions that they're doing come off well, but that they're actually training the next generation of lighting, sound, and scenic and costume designers. Would you all talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I was and I wanted to uplift a very important word that was brought up as far as like practicality and talking about what that is again in that long-term vision of who is going to run said system or equipment that is going to be in the space, who is going to then going to teach the rest of the students to like put that equipment into practice. There was one application that was really moved as far as the immense amount of intention as far as they reached out to a consultant who was a personal friend of the school and was thinking about how are we going to work this practice, and even allocated the time to say, I'm going to carve out time to be in the space to teach 3 students, which I found to be very impressive, which goes to show as far as how are we going to continue this cycle of teaching and passing down, which I find to be one of the most important and immaculate reasons to give somebody money to.
I deeply agree with what everybody has said, and especially, we, as David said, we were you once, we are you now. So we want to help in the best way possible. And one of the things, long-term is very important. And also, this idea of future generations, there is a world out there of jobs for people in design in all sorts of ways that aren't just lighting designers, but technicians and all sorts of things that have for your students where which will be great for their future and great for their self-esteem on top of it all. But one of the things that I've really noticed in some of these applications is that there are many schools who have the dream that I just talked about, and they want that for their students, but have, so I'm speaking to the people who don't even know what they want and don't even know what they don't know. So sometimes I think there are schools that for instance, you just want to see people's faces. So somebody's gone to somebody and they found out that there's a lighting kit that you can get with 20 lights on it or something. But what happens to us when we're doing judging the applications is we then don't know what you need these 20 lights for. So if you can find some way, and this, I would call it extremely emotional, because we live in an emotional, because theater and entertainment is such an emotional art form, which is, do you just want to see their faces? Do you want to be able to express mood? There are no lights at all in our theater. So if there are no lights at all in the theater, maybe you tell us, how big is your theater? And maybe we can fill in some of those blanks for you. How big is the theater? What kind of shows do you want to do? So if you don't know what you want, explain what you think you need, and maybe this panel somehow can help and fill in those blanks. That's
a very, very, very important point, because that's one of the things I have to say, of all the things I get to do, being part of this panel, is so amazing to see these professionals give of their heart and soul, and they look at your application and they want to try and make it work, and part of the reason we're doing this webinar is like, can we help, teachers make good decisions about what they need? Because I often hear you say, actually, they don't need this. This would actually serve the need better. And so it's a really important point. And even to say, we're not sure what we need. We need something in here. That's at least being, honest. because I think that's really important, because I think the goal here is to make, Zinn made the point about sustainable. We're looking at something that's sustainable, that makes the theater program continue, that also is, as we talked before, the equipment is something that the next generation of designers can be trained upon. So that's just a really important point that we want to sort of help. But we're going to keep doing webinars based on when the applications come in, if we see there's a need for something like that.
It's totally worth saying that it's often in linking those applications, sometimes people ask for too little, sometimes people ask for too much. And I think a thing to know when you're making the application is, because I think what Natasha said is great. Like, if you don't know, great guess, but tell us that you're not sure. Like, I could use some guidance about what this is, but here's the need I'm trying to fill. Because we also, as panelists, have agency to be like, cool, I'm not going to meet your whole demand, but we are going to meet this, amount of that ask. Or we don't think you've asked for too much. We don't think you've asked for enough. We like what you've done. We actually don't think you've asked for enough to do that. So can we circle back and talk to you about that? Like, I think, don't be afraid to ask what you need ask for what you need, and don't be afraid to say you're not sure what it is that you're looking for.
Yeah. And, just to go off of what Zinn just said, for those who are applying and submitting at the end of next month, in the past, we have had some recipients who submit a proposal. We will collect proposals up to $50,000, and we will partially fund some proposals based on this feedback. So that's just giving some additional context to what Zinn is talking about. So Germán, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, in that vein, as far as transparency and acknowledging where, as an educator, to assess where the institution, or rather where the program is looking, where it is at, it is a vital importance to say, where am I going to, what am I trying to achieve with said program? Which that kind of level of transparency of saying, hey, we quite literally need to be seen and heard and uplift the things that the wonderful panelists just said, really goes a long way.
Great. Melissa, do you want to begin to take some of the questions from the chat? One of the ones that I think was interesting, is there an amount too little or too big? And I want some help in answering this, but I think it's not, I don't think there is. I think it really is about making sure that the story matches the request. And we've seen stories that matched the $50,000 request, and we funded those stories. And we've seen stories that matched the $1,000 request, and we funded those stories. But does anybody else have a comment on that?
Yeah, I'll just say, obviously there's a limited amount of money, resources. So, you should ask for what you truly need, and that, like Heather said, it comes through in the story and the ask. So, not necessarily going to hit all the 50s, you know what I mean? Like, we're going to make sure the most amount of people are affected. So don't feel like you have to fill out a request to hit some sort of number. Like, you should, or don't hold back. Just ask for what you need, and that will shine through.
Is it okay for us to share that story of the curtains that we were all moved by?
Please.
In that kind of vein of trying to maximize and stretch where that grant money goes to, we were really moved as a panel, as far as I believe it was an elementary school who had a cafetorium. And their very simple and humble request was they wanted curtains. And in their presentation of just asking for curtains, we did try to look at how can we make this one ask happen, because it was so humble, it was so simple, and as far as long-term for presentation of what it was going to do for the students, for the community, and how it would encourage the rest of the program, was something that we found that this is going to make it a generous impact to this school. So as far as thinking, yes, shoot for the stars, absolutely. Think about whole systems, whole set pieces, everything. But think about what is the one impactful thing that would make the difference in your community, that would truly turn the corner as far as we are going from a closet presentation to inviting folks into a storytelling experience.
Yeah, and when we get the bigger requests, I really just want to say this panel digs into those requests and say, and they look at the story and they dig into the requests and they're like, we don't think we can do the whole thing, but we really think this thing would take them to the next level. So I think, and I think this program is really about where are you at? Tell us where you're at and tell us where you want to go. And we want to make sure this grant takes you the next step to where you want to go. That's really, I think, what we try and do with the program.
But also, I would say also it's like, where are you at, where you want to go, and how are you going to continue to support that, and whether that means there is one person and I'm going to continue to support it by doing X, Y, and Z, or we have a staff of 3 people. It's not about like, do you have a professional staff to carry this out, but does the size of your ask and match your ability to sustain it? And that can be at any scale, but I feel like that those two things, having some agreement, helps us understand that you know what you're asking, and you can continue to make kind of steward that the ask yields dividends.
I think it'll be really fast. I think what David said is really important, because one of the things that happens with some of the applications is a lot of equipment, which are things that have to be carried and lugged and moved and cables run, and all of that takes a lot of people to do. Or it takes one person who really will spend all night doing it. That if you could let us know in terms of the future and all of it, who's going to help do that? Who's going to help you do it? Because if you ask for $50,000 of equipment, who's actually going to put it up?
Right. Thinking it through. There are a lot of questions that are coming in about eligibility. This program is for schools, and we are looking for schools that are lacking in resources, Title I schools. We are looking for a diverse student population. Those are the kinds of things. There is not a grade preference that is better. Actually, the earlier we get people, the better, but we fund elementary schools, we fund junior highs, we fund high schools, and we want to fund the whole range of those things. I think those were the main questions. And it doesn't go to theater programs at schools. It really does go to theater teachers working within public schools.
Correct. And I want to ask a question off of, I think what the heart of this initiative really is in reaching students from underrepresented populations. And I would love to hear the panel's thoughts on ways that educators can encourage students from those populations to really participate and engage in theater.
I mean, I'll just say a little bit from my, scenery. I do feel like the point of the experience at a school is to be seen and be heard. And so that's light and that's sound. And for me, at that stage, scenery and costumes, in quotes, is a little bit of some icing on the cake. But there are so many ways when you're working with kids in high school, middle schools, elementary schools, you're not necessarily like, kids aren't like, I want to be, I was, but mostly kids aren't like, I want to be a set designer, I want to be a costume designer. But if you have the capacity, I'm saying this to you as a person, as a group of people who work in education, I know how overworked you are. I know you're here because you love both your students and what you do. So thank you. I know that means you don't have an enormous capacity to take on other work, but I think ways to bring in people who aren't able to articulate yet, I want to be a set designer, but like this room feels like a good room for me to be in. The answer is, cool, what can you do? And how can I support that? Can I ask my grade school kids to, my class to color in, different colored rainbows on different colored pieces of paper, and we're going to glue that to the piece of foam core, and that's going to be our set for the Wizard of Oz. Meet people where they are. Ask them how they want to contribute. What do they need? If they had a sewing machine at the school, like that, because they don't have one at home, is that a way that you could bring people to your shop to begin to allow them to find on their own terms, not on the like Trek Junior terms or the, you know, whatever terms of the show that you've seen pictures of, but on their own terms, how can you support and foster their creativity? Can you buy paint? Can you buy paintbrushes? Can you buy big pieces of, you know, wood for them to paint on and call that a set? It doesn't have to look like a Broadway production. It oughtn't to look like a Broadway production. It should look like an expression of the students you have and the place that you are. That's my speech about that.
Love it.
Who wants to follow that?
Right.
Yeah. No,
That was great, David
beautiful.
said. Agreed.
I would say one of the reasons, because I see some questions about the focus on equipment, that kind of arrived naturally. One of the reasons that this program exists is because there is a pipeline problem into our industry in the fields of design in particular. And, you know, part of that is, and we notice this because we give scholarships as part of another tier of this program for training and development. And we find still too often we only meet kids as actors because that's the only thing they know or understand what to do. And so one of the reasons this program became so important is, one, we quickly realized through the first few years of the programs that there were a lot of requests for this because this was a huge need. And we also quickly realized in providing this equipment and also making sure that kids were getting trained on it, we were executing one of the fundamental goals of the program, which was to build the pipeline of people doing this work, you know, into the industry. And I would say, I think, I would get agreement, like what you were saying, Zinn, if a teacher had an initiative that was about, you know, inviting kids who are not theater kids in to try and, you know, learn these things, that would be something that's funded by the program. You know, I think that would be something that we would find interesting. I think what we don't want to do, because it's not sustainable, is just provide support for this year's productions. We're looking to provide that kind of sustainable support. Does that ring true to all of you?
Absolutely. I mean, in that vein, as far as encouraging folks who are underrepresented, it is how are we nurturing the potential of some folk in any of these areas? How are we creating community? How are we creating an escape from our day-to-day? I say this as one of those students who wanted to escape my home, and rehearsals was that kind of place. You know, as far as like thoughts of non-traditional casting or you know, gender swap, kind of how is theater fun? Because that, when I think about theater at its core, it was a fun escape for me at that point. It wasn't any kind of big production. It was, what were we doing as a form of expression? And to nurture that kind of expression through all these mediums is really at the heart of what we're trying to do here.
I would also just say generically, like, I think what we've talked about so far is like how to create like welcoming environments, but it's also, if part of what makes some of these grants applications really attractive is the long-term sustainability, not just of an individual program, but also, you know, are there people who may be touched by this grant who then might be interested in pursuing this professionally? I would say, you know, try to find who those like local, you know, heroes are for, you know, these individual students. Like, you know, I'm from New York and I grew up in the suburbs of New York City. Maybe it doesn't always have to be like, look at such and such Broadway show, unless, you know, you think there's something that would like specifically touch those students about the subject matter or the people on stage. There's also really cool theater going on with like National Black Theater in Harlem, or like, you know, like a little bit outside maybe like what gets the press every. But I think the extent we can show students there is work in this if you want it, and there's a profession ahead of this if you want it, and if you just want it to be a cool place to like escape, you know, rehearse, that's great too. I think a lot of us on this panel probably didn't know that there was a profession in this necessarily when we all started, or you know, at the very beginning. So kind of helping them connect, you know, from where they are today to what a future may look like, I think is really impactful for, you know, any student.
And just to talk concretely real quick about a story that really impacted me in particular was there was a group out in Boston who was a more an after school, not necessarily theater, but it was a bunch of bilingual immigrant students who would meet up and talk art, and their kind of capstone project was to perform these self-developmental, self-created like pieces of monologue, theater, song, dance, and what their simple ask was they wanted truly just a space to do that with minimal props. And that was a yes from us because it was an impact that made the difference of what these at-risk students could have been, or of what kind of positive impact it would have been for their kind of personal development and or artistic development as well.
I want to be mindful of time. I know we've kind of like delved into answering specific audience questions, so please keep submitting them in the Q&A. I want to highlight something that Nikki Ortiz submitted, because I think it's a good example of the just highlighting or showcasing the kind of projects or proposals we're interested in funding. But she asks, my middle school does not have a stage at all. And since taking over the theater program, I've established a partnership with our local elementary school to use their cafetorium space. Would grants be considered even if the materials requested are going to be transported between schools? And I just want to jump in and say that we actually have past recipients who, because we recognize the theater programs and spaces are not all the same across all of our schools. And so sometimes that space needs to be created through portable dance floors, and so that is absolutely something I think the panel would be interested in funding and has funded in the past. And I'll let the rest of the panelists, I know Germán, you have your hand up, but for everyone who's curious about what are some of these past projects, all of these summaries of projects we have funded, they live on our website. If you go to our Andrew Lloyd Webber initiative page, you can see by year the kinds of projects we fund and for how much. So I'll kick it over to you, Germán.
Yeah, no, in that same vein, as far as how are we thinking of expansion, how do we make non-traditional theater accessible to more folk? There was an elementary school or middle school in Florida who was looking for a rolling cart situation because their objective was to take theater and their self-development container of a theater and bring it to other schools in the area, which is another example of how are we the art and foundation of what is theater and as an element, and how we provide that to everyone still living on through this medium that we will take it on everywhere. So that is but one example of what you just uplifted.
And I'll also say, I see a lot of, I was just perusing the chat, like a lot of questions. Is it just after school? I mean, is it just programs where there's drama inside the school day? And I think, no, we understand so many drama programs are after school. I think we're just saying you are the teacher, even though it's after school. So yes, you are eligible to apply for the after school theater program.
Yeah, and I see so many needs, and part of the reason that we wanted to champion this particular, and the Andrew Lloyd Webber initiative actually has 3 tiers. One is the classroom resources grants. The other is training scholarships, advanced training for students that demonstrates talent in various disciplines, but can't afford to get after school or summer intensive training in order to enter, college. And then we have the 3rd tier, which is college scholarships along with mentorships, is because we realized, there is a crisis in arts education, in this country. And so my heart is breaking as I read some of these chats. So we can barely afford to keep the program going. And so, we are trying to do our part, and we're trying to use our platform to encourage other resources. We can't obviously meet every need, but beyond the grant programs we're using our voice to advocate for how important arts education is, not only for the next generation on our stages and behind the scenes, but also for our humanity and for our economy. So just know that you have some of the most passionate advocates here for you that are, these folks are using their time tonight. And while we can't meet every need, we are constantly trying to meet more needs as we go forward. But Melissa, I'm looking to see if there are some other questions we haven't, and if anybody wants to respond to anything that they see.
Yeah, I'm seeing a few questions, and I think this is a bit more logistical, but important to answer and for the panel to weigh in on. I'm seeing some questions about how important it is for funds or matching funds to be raised. So does anyone want to weigh in on that specifically?
I mean, I don't think it's important at all. I mean, it's cool if you have some idea about that, but I don't. You can just make an ask that's its own contained thing, and I think that's great. I can't really stress enough that I think, like, other than the kind of whatever the structures are around the particular application process, like, I don't like just ask us for what you need or want or think you just ask for help. And we'll try to help you.
I was just going to say, I was wondering myself, like, every time I've only done the panel once, so I really like dove into what you were asked to apply to when I read, when I was preparing the last time for the panel, like, and there are a bunch of these questions are on the website and the facts and on the, like, what is covered and what isn't covered. So, like, there is, I'm sure there are still questions. I'm just saying, I happen to go looking myself just to see if some of these questions that we might not get to in the next 8 minutes, if you go to the website, there are a lot of answers there.
And there still is the ability to email programs@americantheaterwing.org. And I just want to, just from a policy standpoint, say what Zinn said from our standpoint is 100% correct on the matching funds. This is not like a fancy competitive like that. This is about, as he said, we want to fund something that's going to make a real difference. In fact, because there are so many needs, we kind of don't expect you to have the matching funds. We're looking at what can we make you closer, because our program is so specific. So, it really is the truth that ask for what you need. Tell the story, as we started in the beginning. Tell us the story of why and what you're trying to do and how this fits into that. And then ask for what you need. And, if you have a lot of needs and you're not sure how to prioritize them, the panel has been good at prioritizing them when we don't have the funds to fund the full application. They've been very good and spend, sometimes 10 or 15 minutes really parsing it to think, okay, if you told your story well, it makes it easier for them as theater professionals to say, oh, okay, this is going to make the most difference here.
Yeah, I think this kind of dives into what I consider some misconceptions, right? That there's something really specific that this panel was looking for, when clearly from all of these examples that have come up, it's a little bit more fluid, because I think the big mission here is how can we support long-term learning for students and enhance these theater programs, and understanding that theater programs are at different stages. So I wouldn't focus so much on what you think this, is a specific project the panel wants to see, and really just paint the story of what your current situation is. Because that is what I feel after years of observing the panel process. Those are the applicants that stand out, is those details of what it is that they're looking for. I don't know if there's maybe some other misconceptions or like big, yes, you should do this, advice you have for our applicants as we're closing out here, just to wrap up on final thoughts.
I would just say I just can't stress enough. Like, there's no like fancy, like, we're zooming to you from our living rooms. There's no like fancy secret, and there's also no I was really surprised and very moved by the, like, it's just, 12 of us or however many of us just trying to weigh these stories and these asks and figure out the best way to serve as many people as we can. And there's literally nothing more complicated than that. And the asks have been very varied in amount, in style, in all of those things. And I, it's just, we're just really, truly, it exists to help you out.
Well, I see two questions and then Germán, one says, do you offer mentorship opportunities? I'm a new theater teacher. I need help. And I would say, yes, apply to get a mentorship, a mentor, somebody to come in, or a consultant to come in and help you do that. Because I think that would be a valid ask. And because there's a teacher who's with students right now listening to this, and the students want to know how they can get involved. And I think they can get involved with you with what they see they need. I think that would be very powerful to see in the applications. The students need this. So I just wanted to make sure we answered those two questions because they were very moving. But Germán, please.
Oh no, it was in agreement with David. That was well said. As far as the asks look different, and there is no one formula. The more transparent and personal assessment as far as where what we need, where we are, is what impacts the lot of us, and say how can we extend ourselves to serve.
And Heather, what you said is so right. Like with the kid, I love that your students are there. Thank you. And with any population or community that you're trying to serve, start with asking what it is that community or population wants. Like that's a way to get people to feel invested and a part of you know what the work that you're making, and because you can make it to suit their needs, which is you know is the key to its success and to its sustainability.
Well, this is the first time of us doing this, and I can't say how grateful I am, first of all, to all of you who showed up to learn more about this, for what you do as true heroes every day, bringing the arts to students, changing lives, and making our business for us better, but also making the world better. We know that, and we know we can't meet your every need, but we're trying to meet some of those needs. And to these people on this Zoom with me, who I admire so deeply because they're working at the top of their game, and they make time so that the next generation can experience what they do, so that we can build a pipeline into the design field. I'm just so grateful to them. And then to Melissa, who is, she was a theater kid who found her way to this side of managing programs. And so really grateful to everyone. And we will do this again. And please reach out, check out the website for examples, check out the FAQs, email programs@americantheaterwing.org. And no matter what, take a risk, tell the story from your heart, and ask for what you need. And it will be read with an open mind, a full heart, and a deep desire to help you.
All right. I think that's a wrap. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, panel. Watch out for that deadline, which is going to be October 25th. It will not be extended past that. And just know that this is going to be recorded and later released on our YouTube channel. So please be on the lookout. But otherwise, thank you so much and have a great night.